All right, well, this is a pretty straightforward lecture, I think. It's about the balance between these two separate parts of ourselves are apparently separate, the inner control and the outer control. And I'll just go over it and say a few words and then we can all discuss it. The guide opens the lecture by talking about the fall of the angels, which is a central concept in the Pathwork and also in the Christian religion. I guess a fall from grace is probably something that occurs in every religion. And, we often say that the Pathwork is a marriage of Eastern and Western philosophies. So the guide kind of, in this lecture, sort of takes the Western approach, which is the active approach to the path of self-facing. Guide says, the fall of the angels is nothing more, nothing less than a change in one's state of mind. To be separated from God is a state of mind, a state of consciousness. And to return to God, to one's creator, is again a state of consciousness. So that means that we have the power to change our consciousness. That's the Western view, right? That we are active, intent can change our consciousness. The guide says that on page 1. Also, talks about the separating wall between parts of ourselves and this concept, which is in many of the lectures, that when you proceed on the path of self-facing, you feel that there are two selves within you. There's two brains. They're kind of operating independently. One brain is hooked into an old way of doing things, the dualistic, and then the other brain is in the unitive state. And they are together, but they're not, you feel them that they're separate. And I think the idea being that as we continue on our path of self-facing, these two separate brains begin to unify. We unify in the unit of consciousness. So the guide says at the end of page 1, when due to increased self-awareness, parts of the wall begin to crumble while other parts still persist. That's another nod to the active principle, the Western principle. In other words, it's our responsibility to fight for, not to use the wrong word, to be part of the struggle for increased self-awareness, which is driven by the ego, right? I mean, the ego brings us to the door of the temple. It can't go inside. The ego brings us to the door of the unitive, but can't open the door. When we get to the door, the unitive consciousness opens the door. But the ego has the role in creating, through effort, the effort of self-facing, creating the greater self-awareness, unifying the dualistic consciousness with the unity. All right, so the guide again talks about the two minds, the two brains. Once on page 1, I think feeling that there are two separate entities is a very important step, right? Because a lot of people don't even get to that point. But when you feel something is born inside of you, a unit of consciousness, that's an important indication that your consciousness is changing. You're raising your consciousness, right? And the Pathwork is all about the raising of consciousness. So on page 2, the guide talks about what the divine consciousness is. He says, the inner center of each human being is one with the inner center of every other human being. All are filled with the living unity that knows no conflict and no limitation. Very interesting, right? I mean, this is the idea that the higher selves of two people or more people can never be in conflict. There are never conflicts between people when you look at it from the perspective of the higher self. In other words, and this is a paradox that we talked about, I think, at the last discussion, that no matter whether people seem to be in conflict on a dualistic level, on a unitive level, they're always not in conflict. They're always in sync. The higher selves of every person, every group are always in unity together. Even though it may appear that there's conflict in the world of duality, as the guide said, in fact, in the world of unity, there is no conflict, which means that everything is unfolding in the exact right and appropriate way that it should unfold. Right, Tracy? Am I putting it in the correct fashion? Yeah, okay. All right, so then that's a very important concept. And that I like to refer to as the Gandhian awareness too, because, Gandhi, I believe in his practice of satyagraha, where he took on the task of awakening the higher self of others. That is the same thing. That is the recognition that no matter if there's a conflict and apparent one, the higher selves of all beings are always in sync. All right. So then the guide talks about, the rest of the lecture is really about these two consciousnesses. And then the guide talks about the issue of the balance of inner and outer control. And the guide gives a kind of primer in how to resolve the conflict between these inner and outer personalities. And I will read it, and then we can all discuss about this lecture. I mean, in so many of our Pathwork lectures, there are these apparent polarities that are resolved by dual. I mean, thinking about it, I must say that I think that the whole theme of the Pathwork lectures is duality leading to unity. First, the raising of consciousness, the understanding of duality, the acknowledgement of duality, then the letting in the consciousness that unity does exist, and then the work, the path of self-facing, the work of resolving the duality and merging it and becoming unity. So I'm going to read these couple of paragraphs, and then we're going to talk about our reactions to the lecture and how we're able to do this, our own, greater or lesser success in finding the unity of these opposites. When your outer self tries to accomplish that which the inner being alone is capable of doing, you cannot succeed. You must run into confusion and difficulties, fear and pain. You inevitably struggle in a most frustrating way. In its oblivion to the inner core, the outer self will try as hard as it can to control what it cannot control. This struggle causes more tension, anxiety, sense of failure, and fear of defeat. But the exhaustion of this futile struggle, with all its senseless outer pressure, also induces the personality to give up in areas where it is most necessary to persevere. For purposeful activity, the exact reverse is needed. When the personality forces and pushes, letting go and giving in to the superior force within the self is necessary. I mean, this is reminiscent of so many metaphors, like learning music or learning a language, where you try to force the awareness, and then suddenly you don't force anymore, and it happens by itself. Where the personality gives up in a hopeless, resigned way without formulating thoughts that can activate the inner nucleus, you need to apply effort and will. Now, there it is again. That's the Western understanding. In other words, the pathwork, the guide says always, you have to apply effort and will. In other words, to bring the unconscious conscious. Don't be hopeless. Don't give in to the mood of hopelessness or resignation, but instead grapple with it. Grapple with the negativity. It would raise your consciousness. He goes on. Unfortunately, too often the line of least resistance prevails in those thought processes that indulge in negativity, while the outer will fights, struggles, and presses for a desired result that cannot come as long as the inner faculties are left out of commission. This tense and anxious pushing occurs in a very subtle yet very real way. It is directed toward others, who one insists have to behave in a certain way to enable the self to accomplish its goal. The pushing is also directed toward the resisting self, which cannot be forced to feel differently as long as the personality ignores that definite reasons exist for its resistance. So there the guide is saying that one outpictures the struggle onto others. One gets frustrated with what others are doing or not doing. That's a substitute for raising consciousness and going within. I also want to say that that relates very strongly to another major theme of the lecture, which is understanding cause and effect, recognizing cause and effect, uncovering, unpacking the cause of your current, as the guide would say, undesirable experiences, because the guide says early on, we are the people, we created the undesirable circumstance, we initiated the cause, and we feel the effect, the undesirable effect, and we have to unpack how we got there. All right. As you progress on your path, you will observe this imbalance of control within your personality, then you can connect it. You will become acutely conscious of how you give in to the most destructive thought patterns and emotions. You will see how in this respect you choose the line of least resistance. Now that your thoughts are no longer hazy because of the pathwork of self-facing, you can evaluate their effect, halt them, and choose a constructive pattern of thinking, feeling, and willing. In the areas of your momentary problem, you will formulate the one constructive wish to reach inside and deliberately activate the vaster divine self that dwells deep within you. So I think this is really the nuts and bolts of the pathwork. It is the ability of the self to deliberately choose a different way of thinking, feeling, and willing, right? Thought, will, and emotion. And that kind of upends a common concept that most of us have, which is we're captive to our moods. We don't have a choice. We have particular moods and we have to suffer the moods. The guide is saying, no, we don't have to. We can choose a constructive pattern of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then he says, and this is the last paragraph I'm going to read. He says, this is not difficult to do. It is, in fact, a much easier course than your present struggle. If only you would say, quote, I, with my outer being, cannot solve this problem, but I know that I must be in confusion and untruth because I'm driven to think, feel, and act in a way that produces hopelessness, fear, frustration, feelings of doubt. I will now deliberately contact and activate the most constructive center of my innermost being and let it move me into the thoughts and realizations I need to have right now, into actions and feelings that are good and productive in this moment. And then let go and let be and let it move you. Let it think through you. Let it feel through you. That is all you have to do. You activate the most potent life center. It will guide you step by step. So that's the guide's, I would say it's a meditation on how to unify this inner and outer will. All right, my friends. So let's talk about this lecture, and I certainly didn't cover everything, but I think that's the essential message of the lecture. You know, the guide also talks earlier on about, the guide always in every lecture, right, gives a promise. And the promise of what we're able to experience if we follow the path of self-facing. And talks about the vast power that's in the divine center. The power contained in the nucleus of your being is so vast that you cannot conceive of it, my friends. Only gradually can you test it and see it at work and marvel at it. All right. Thoughts and what do you guys, Ellen, you're muted for some
Hi,
reason. Go
hi
ahead.
there. Gosh, oh, I have so many questions and conflicts that come up with this about what we create, what we are what we cause. So I I'm not sure in my mind, okay, like I know I can affect, obviously I can have influence over my state of being, my thoughts, my moods, but what do I create? And I know this is something I'm always like grappling with, the whole, because it's very much like, we create a reality, or the Course in Miracles, like the Course in Miracles is continually saying, you created this, you created this. And I'm just, yeah, I find myself really, I really would love
Yeah.
some that.
Well, I'll answer that. I'm sure a lot of people would like to talk about that. I mean, this is a very deep question, very deep. And the way I look at it is in two ways. One of them is that, as Sadhguru says, if you guys like Sadhguru, uh, he says that whatever happens in this moment is inevitable. In other words, this moment, everything that existed and you did, you created, led up to this moment when we are right now. So you can't change this moment, but you can change future moments based on your intention and your awareness of what's going on now. That's the first way to look at it. The second way is that um, causes and effects are very deep. Some are conscious and many are unconscious. You know, the Pathwork, the guide always says that the personality is like the proverbial iceberg, where eight tenths, is it 9/10 or 8/9 is underwater. So in other words, the iceberg is moving in a particular direction. You only see the tip of the iceberg, and you think that the tip of the iceberg is all that there is. It isn't. The bulk of the iceberg decides which way the iceberg moves, because that's where the center of gravity is. And in us, the bulk of the iceberg is unconscious. We don't we don't we don't have a connection to it. In other words, our conscious mind doesn't connect to it. It is built up of these images, these wrong conclusions, and also karma, things that came in from a previous life that now are running the show. So bring our the more we become conscious of our innermost motivations and our images and this and that, I would say the more the iceberg rises up above the water, and the more of it we can control in terms of where it's going. Does that make sense?
Well, there seems to be a paradox in that because, I since I've spent my adult life like in that process of, that imagery came to me when I was 23, the iceberg image, right? I mean, that was 37 years ago. And I've never and and then a teacher for 10, making the unconscious conscious, the unconscious conscious. But the truth is, I have experienced that if in with certain matters, if I just say, you are creating this, like even like I'm having a physical experience, another me and my physical of nausea. And I'm actually kind of trying to work with it, like, what is going on. So, telling big long stories. I'm not sure if I'm being clear about that because I feel like at a certain point I thought, I'm spending all this time trying to make my conscious, unconscious, conscious, and actually kind of almost, I'm not sure how to say it. I'm not sure how to really express this, but I saw that it was counterproductive at a certain point. In other words, I was like staring at that what are the words they use for it? The core, that core, and without really coming out into the world. So there's like some, I feel like there's like some key about being able to actually take responsibility in the present moment, to actually be able to say, I'm creating this experience. I feel like I know people who seem to do that.
Tracy, what do you think? I'm sure this is something you can comment on. Can't hear you.
She's having trouble with her sound.
Oh, yeah.
Alan, I
Okay.
wanted to ask.
I'm going to use my phone.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, you can use your phone and turn the audio down on your phone, maybe.
And
Or
this
I'm
is-
sorry, feedback, but try it.
I'm going to.
So the reason I picked on you, Tracy, is because you're contending with this issue, I think, all the time. You're very active in terms of how you change your consciousness.
Yes. So I just turned off my computer. Despite my best efforts, I could hear and see all of you perfectly, but I couldn't get you guys to hear me. So I'm just going to use my phone, hold it out. I think this is like the threshold key and the looking glass, the threshold looking glass that I went through in my spiritual path was when I really knew, absolutely knew that I was that I had created and was creating and will create my reality. For the longest time, I resisted that because it's, in some ways, for me, it was more comfortable to remain in a victim mentality. So if something happened that wasn't good, rather than take responsibility for that, it was more convenient to play the victim role, like somebody did this to me, or fate did this to me, or life did this to me. And at some point, I knew unequivocally that that wasn't true. That regardless of how much it may seem that I, bad luck had befallen me, or that somebody had done something to me, even something so seemingly not my fault as like walking down the street and, bicycle runs into me, which is quite possible in New York City with the delivery bicycles, that even that was something that I had set in motion and I had created. So I think what was really, for me, the thing that made me understand it the most was that it's not that we have the power to create these external events. So I heard a news report about a hurricane that had come through, no, tornado that had come through a town out in the Midwest. And for reasons that, I know you've all heard this story many times, it would take down one house, and then the house right next to it would be left untouched. And then, two houses down the road would be wiped out, and then the next house would be untouched. So I think what I realized by listening to this news report was that the consciousness of the people who own those houses is what attracted that hurricane to either destroy it or to completely pass it by and leave it untouched. So that made it easier for me to really, it was really like going through a looking glass when I completely and totally, no matter what happens, I know that somehow I've set it in motion. Somehow I'm responsible for it. This life, another life, who knows what, it doesn't really matter, but that something about, I am the magnet. I am the common element, and that I'm attracting these, good or bad, not necessarily just bad, it's not bad. I'll eat plenty of good things too, fortunately. But at this point, no matter what happens, I almost immediately say to myself, what in the heck did you do that to yourself for, girl? And start trying to figure out why I manifested it. I don't doubt that anymore. The guide says it practically in every lecture. I made a list of major pathwork themes that recur over and over and over and over and over again in the lectures, and there were 7 of them on my list. And of course, the 7 have, different components, but I think number 1 was that we are creating our own reality. And I've actually gotten to the point lately, which is a little bit in some ways scary to me, where I really think that it's so true that I could be sitting here with Joel, which I am, and we in the exact same room, in the exact same point in time, not have not have the same experience, which obviously is also true. I mean, he's not going to have the same experience that I'm having tonight, but I mean, where it could be really drastically different.
Could you talk a little bit about how you came to this?
He's
How
at,
did you accept this?
right. Joel's asking me to talk about how I accepted this. Well, this was really, I guess this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Accepting it, because you don't want to accept the fact that you're responsible for everything, especially the bad stuff. We just don't want to accept that. And I guess I came to, it was more of a knowing. It was just that at some point, I just, and the, reading the Pathwork lecture, studying and all the different, I mean, I've been at this now for 10 years, which is nothing compared to Marion, but it's not a day either. And at some point in this journey, I just do it. And when you know it, even though you don't, and I don't, who likes it? I mean, I still prefer to blame somebody else if something goes wrong. Yeah, Joel, he's usually my first person I point my finger at, but I know that's not the truth. And I think that when so for me, to answer your question, Joel, how I came to accept it as the truth was just because I knew it was the truth. And this was really the major first gate that I went through in the Pathwork, because once I accepted that as true, then I could start to unravel things, rather than spending my time feeling sorry for myself, justifying it, explaining it away, pointing fingers, and every other thing that I did for my entire life. I could start to unravel it. Figure, wow, what'd you do this for? And this is a tough one, but I found, and I think everybody, of course, would find different gates in the Pathwork easier or more difficult to pass through. This was a very difficult gate to pass through. But once I passed through this one, the other gates were much easier for me.
Yeah, it reminds me of the saying that it's easier for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle.
Yeah, sorry, I had my video off. I don't get a very good grade if I get my laptop's not working, and now my phone, I had the video off. Yes, well, here I am. Yes, too much sun today in Turks, but I think exactly. But that saying of the Jesus is easier for
The rich man to,
to get the eye of the needle, whatever. I forget the whole saying now, but that's just, I think I don't know if that's like even this kind of concept responsibility, but like if you're very rich, either in terms of money or other things in this world, on this plane, which like Eckhart Tolle would say, the horizontal plane, you're pretty satisfied. It's like, well, this works for me. This sandbox works just fine. You're not really motivated to look for other dimensions of consciousness, because this surface one, this horizontal one that we all share. Hey, yeah, I got this leg. This is,
okay, but I mean,
Well,
why
go
are all
ahead.
there all the,
Sorry.
yeah, sure, yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
What you're saying actually speaks to what I was going to say, which is there's another side to this, so us, people who are, like to generally be, not, overly powerful, conceited. It's like, oh, it's a hard thing, but there's another side, which is that it can be egoically really satisfying too, to say, I create everything, I'm responsible, because I know and I think it may be a window into the fear. because the person who was like kind of a spiritual awakening partner is a kind of a narcissistic personality type. And so he loves that, right? It's like, I create this, I create, and so the whole thing about the rich man, maybe that's speaking to, well, if that person feels they get everything like that, like that, like that, that's like this weird kind of egoic, right,
Well,
very human, strange thing, like whatever, I
That they're all,
created the snow or something.
but there are all these stories about these rich and powerful people, like these princes and kings who go off on a quest because somehow they're not satisfied. All
Right.
having all the material things is just not enough, so they have to go off on a quest. But the reason I brought up that metaphor about the camel going through the eye of the needle is because it seems completely impossible. It's a paradox. In other words, you have to make a transformation that is kind of radical. I guess that's what you're saying, Tracy. I mean, I do like a lot what you're saying, and I do believe that's the essence. That is a very important essence of the path work. I mean, people say, well, I can't really control what happens to me, but I can control my response to it. But that's not what the
That's
path.
the first step.
That's the
That's
first
the
step.
first step.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's a good step. That's I mean, that's a really good first step, which is, I can't control what happens to me. I can't control the cards that were dealt to me, but I can control how I play them. And that's just the first step in self-responsibility. So there's nothing, that's a great first step. I mean, and it's a precursor to really being able to accept that, yeah, not only can you have control over the cards that were dealt to you, but guess what? You dealt them to yourself. And see, I don't find it so ego satisfying, because of a lot of my life has been fraught with pain and disappointment and struggle. So I don't think like, oh, you're so great.
No, it's a personality type, very specific, that would think that way. That's what I was trying to say. It's not, that's not likely that you or, but it's, anyways, sorry to.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe somebody who's really got it all together and all their ducks are lined up, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a winner. I can do this, and so can you. And I think you're right. There would be that type of reaction until the other shoe drops, because as we know, no matter how successful and wonderful anybody is, there's going to be the moments where the other shoes drop, and things won't be all roses. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
I just want to add that I remember that Eva used to say that when things in your life happen that you don't understand, imagine that that's a dream and try to interpret it as a dream, which I think is pretty cool. Things that occur and you say, how the hell could I have caused that? Or what's going on with this? What if it was the dream? How would you analyze it, interpret it as a dream? Right, Marian? I guess you remember that. She used to say that. And there was a book she actually recommended called The Dream Game by Anne Faraday. Dreams are very important in the path work. Eva would talk a lot about her dreams. Of course, this goes back to Freud, right? But dreams aren't talked about very much in the path work these days. And I have a hard time remembering my dreams in any case. Stephen, greetings.
Sorry, who is the author of that book?
Anne Faraday, The Dream Game.
Could I just make one additional comment to what Tracy was saying in response to Ellen before we turn to Stephen? So I would say, why might I have created this difficulty?
Well, that's the process of connecting cause and effect and unpacking things, right? That the guy talks about in the lecture.
So even if I'm not ready to say I have created this, look at this mess that I've made, or look at this suffering that I've brought to myself, say, why might I have done this? Or what am I supposed to learn from this?
Well, I think
or what does this difficulty have to do with my inner life at this particular time?
I think that's a little bit similar to the concept of taking the circumstance and looking at it as a dream. In other words, I
Standing
take this
outside of
thing
it.
on the outside and I bring it inside my consciousness. I take this thing that happened and I own it. I said, this is a dream I had. What does it mean?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
cool.
So I have a question here for Tracy and Alan. So I agree completely with Tracy. I recently came to the same conclusion as you did. But what prompted my discovery, I'm just wondering who is, like there is an ego and there is a higher self, right? So in this lecture, what is the ignorant one versus, I understand the higher self is like our soul. I have some contacts with it through my meditation practice. I know it's beautiful, powerful, and I know it's there. But the one that creates trouble and creates those, I have a feeling that could also be the higher self, because what it's trying to do, it's like I read in other books and from Christ, basically it says kill the self. So that little ego self that always wants to say me, through a negative or positive, just always wants to be in the center of attention, always wants to feel important, always wants to feel in driver's seats. That's the one that needs to go if the soul was to step in, right? So I understand this lecture. I think it's a very wise lecture. I completely agree with Tracy. I do believe that we create our own circumstances to grow, for the soul to grow and to get the ego under control and to really realize how powerful that grip of that ego is. But who is the negative here? I just don't know, because, Pathwork has all those things. You guys are better at it. So there is this higher self, but who is the one creating this? Who is the one that's getting in trouble and shutting it down? Is that the lower self? Is that the ego self? Like, in this lecture, he wants us to go for the higher self, which I completely understand. But who's the one separated?
Well,
Who's the one?
I think that the lower self is two aspects. It's negative intention and it's buried deep unconscious images that are so deeply buried and so powerful that we don't even recognize them as something that we have originally created. Maybe that's the wrong way to slice it.
Oh, this is a very good way, Alan. You've hit it on the head. So this is a part of a lower self that created those images, maybe even in childhood, or brought them in. And it's so buried into subconscious, we really have to be so acutely aware what the hell it's doing and why.
I think the guide talks about it as unpurified aspects of consciousness. And the ego has two dimensions too. There's what the guide calls the little ego, right? Which is the petty egotistical self that tries to aggrandize. The little ego is the same as the idealized self-image. In other words, it's a limited concept of the self that seeks domination over others and seeks power. Then there's the healthy ego, which is us, what we're doing right now. The healthy ego is expanding our consciousness, looking at concepts, weighing things, looking at this issue of duality and unity and bringing us to a state of unity. The healthy ego is the part of ourselves that kind of takes charge in a positive way. When the guide keeps talking about that, we can decide to change our willing, acting, and feeling, a thinking, feeling, and willing. That's the healthy ego that embarks on that attempt.
Okay. And then the little ego and the subconscious and the lower self holds the key for the negative creations.
Right. The pathwork is about unpacking the lower self, understanding the lower self. And how do we do that? By looking at cause and effect. Because when we raise our consciousness, we understand that whatever we experience is something that we caused, we created in some way. Right, Tracy? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I just had to unmute. No, I think so. And I was just sitting here thinking about Teresa's question, because I think maybe everything might be actually created by our higher self in some ways, because even the pain and the suffering is what wakes us up.
Sure.
So, you know,
No.
so the bad things, if you will, not necessarily the creation of some, you know, the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, it might be our higher self leading us, you know, to the light, because I think everything, I mean, our whole purpose for even being here, incarnated in these different forms, is to awaken ourselves.
And the lower self helps us do that also.
And so the lower selves helped us do that too.
Yes. And so everything really works together for the greater good, so to speak.
Right.
Yes,
The lower
that's a very
self
important.
needs to be, so the lower self needs to be tamed, right? The lower self needs to be re-educated. It's like a wrong child that basically you got to look at it and say, what the hell are you doing? I understand you hurt, but look at where you're heading. And then put the light from the higher self on it
Mhm.
to basically realize what the hell it's doing.
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's a good statement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's another one of the paradoxes, which is what appears to be bad may really be good, and vice versa. You know, some very bad circumstance, some suffering might appear to be very bad, but it could really be good because it works to guide us more toward our truth. Juan, any thoughts? Or Susan?
Yeah, hi everyone. I just want to actually start, Alan, by reading on page 4, the paragraph before the one you read, because I think it shed a little bit of light from the way I understand it to Teresa was talking about, and what has been discussed in the past half an hour or so. This is the third paragraph on page 4. And it goes like this. As long as you are separated from the center, you must be weak and lost. Your separated brain and personality cannot do what can be accomplished solidly in cooperation with their inner center. The other personality levels serve one purpose: to reach the inner being, to know the power of the inner being, to conceive of the beauty and the possibilities of the inner being, to establish a deliberate contact with their inner center. The outer self has to allow itself to be guided, moved, and filled with what comes forth from their inner self. When the outer personality deliberately makes room for it, the inner self will spontaneously manifest. In this process, the outer personality will eventually integrate with their inner nucleus. To me, that's that this whole thing boils down to that, to really, as Teresa also mentioned, that that the ego. I mean, this is the goal that I think God wants, and this is, I think, also from my view, what Jesus came to show us, to really be able to conquer this outer self or ego self, which is really standing in the way of us, we separated being after we fell from the fall, which is again just a state of consciousness, just a state of being that didn't happen exactly at some place in time and space. It's just a state of consciousness. So when we fell from that state, from that time on, it has been God's goal and desire to really bring us back to that state of awareness, to that state of unity. But the ego, which is basically, the way I understand it, an instrument of the lower self, is getting in the way. And until this ego not be destroyed, because we need it, as he says here, we needed to deliberately make that effort. We need to use it, our outer personality, to really take that first step, make that first move and say, you know what, I have been struggling. This happened to me personally. I think my type of personality, the self-will and fear, of course, is always strong in all of us. But you know, when I see that when I try all the time to do things my way, the way I understood by using my ego, okay, I want this and I'm gonna go for it. Now I'll try to accomplish it with my own sheer will and not really wanting to humble myself enough and to allow the higher power that is out there and within me and everywhere to really kind of like submit to it and allow it to act to me, as he says here, to think through me, to drive me, to use me as a vehicle to achieve what I need to achieve, which is that state of unity. So in other words, so the ego, we need it. So it cannot be destroyed, but it needs to be, as the word, using the word Teresa used, tamed or really educated, as the word the guide uses here, to really let it know and really make it understand that you cannot do things separately from this higher being, which is what you are part of, because the ego is a spark of the higher self. So you need this, and you need to understand and really become aware that in order for you to accomplish anything worthwhile in this world, and to really reach that state of unity, which is your destiny, which is your soul task, which is the end of all living things, because we all eventually ended up there back in that state of union. You need to unite with a higher self, with a higher being, and just allow it to carry you. Allow you, yourself, ego self, to be the instrument of this higher being, and just let it work through you.
Mhm.
But you know, and basically, I think also referring to what you mentioned about the camel and the rich man, is pretty much the same concept, the way I see it, because it really comes back to the fact that a camel doesn't have an ego really, because it hasn't evolved to that level yet. The rich man, he does, because he's so really attached. The ego self is making him believe that all these material possessions and wealth and abundance and things that he has, this is all there is. So the ego, in that state of illusion and confusion, makes him believe that. So it's much harder for a man who is, the ego is in the way to to go through the to the eye of a needle, than to a camel, which is God can make it happen easily, because the camel is like, okay, because Jesus also said in the same saying, what is impossible to man is possible to God. So it's basically easy for God to take that camel and basically put it through the eye of a needle than to take a man which is unwilling and has the ego standing in the way of of him allowing basically can't humble himself enough to allow the spirit to drive him to the eye of the needle, because it won't. He think the wealth and all the material possession that he has is all there is, and he's so attached to that he won't let go and allow the inner being to take over. So it's very profound. I mean, the way I see it, all this, but I think it boils down to that, to really reaching that state of awareness and consciousness where one can allow himself or herself to just submit to that inner being, and allow it basically to work through that self. That's my understanding.
Now, that's certainly a very big part of it, I think, Juan. And maybe that also allows for the Eastern approach, which is letting go and letting God, not
That's right.
always having to strive. It's both, right? We have to let go and let God, and we also have to strive and
That's right. Yeah. As the guy explains, there are those aspects of our personality when we need to let go and really allow the self, because in those areas we are okay. We have allowed the higher self to penetrate us, to penetrate the personality. But there are those aspects where the ego strives and forces and wants to do things its way. That's where we need to really put the effort in. It's like, no, say no, that's it. You can't be doing this. In this area of my personality, I have to allow the higher being to come in and really take over and drive me, instead of with the ego self, my sheer will, just pushing and forcing. So yeah, it's all related, really. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, Mary Jane?
Tons of thoughts, but I mean, just right now, I'm thinking, especially after everything Juan said, and thank you, Juan, Tracy, and Ellen, and Alan. the difference between forcing our will and willing our will. You know, having that understanding of we're in control of everything. But to me, it seems like a very fine balance of having that without forcing that. And, you know, all of this is because I am new to Pathwork, and there is a, you know, I am naive in these concepts. So I'm always left with a million questions.
You're talking about the distinction between the concept of creating your own reality or willing.
Right.
In other words, where's the willing coming from? Is that what you're saying? Is the willing coming from the ego, or is it coming from some deeper?
Versus trying to force my reality. Like, you know, that's the difference.
Right. That's right. And the guide always says, you know, that we may want something and we can have the thing that we want, but it may not be in the way that we think we have to get it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, in other words, you can have fulfillment, but you have to let go of insisting that the fulfillment be particular in the specific way that your ego might want it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then how do we know?
I guess you just feel right about it, right? I mean, I guess that when you feel the unity of consciousness, you feel it. You feel
you feel
that
that harmony. Mm-hmm.
Something loosens up. Feel something expands. You know, I keep thinking that the unity of consciousness, what I see is that suddenly there are infinite spaces between things that didn't exist before. I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but things expand in a kind of relaxed way. I'm not sure if I'm articulating that.
No, you definitely are. And I guess as you're speaking this, I get glimpses, bless you, I get glimpses of that, you know, from time to time. And so that's enticing.
Right. Yeah.
I definitely, you know, I'm not there most of the time.
Well, that's why we're here on Earth, ladies and gentlemen.
Both of us are not.
Steve, Susan, did you want to say something? Or
yeah, but I see Marion has her hand raised.
well, there you go. Hey, Marion, I'm sorry.
Well, I can go next, Susan.
Oh, but, okay.
I can go after you, Susan.
Okay. So, first of all, I from the last lecture, which I'm so sorry I missed the discussion, but I just listened to it yesterday. Things really started to change for me in terms of what it says here on page 3, struggling against seeing my own involvement. I've talked in here about the issue with my sisters, verbally, you know, being verbally abusive, and after reading that lecture, I was able to see my part in that. Like that we are made from the same cloth, that we came from the same family. I'm part of that dynamic, and I was still acting as part of that dynamic. And being able to see that and take responsibility for that, like, instantly changed the dynamic. It's like for the first time in at least 3 years, my sisters, all 3 of them, were able to be civil with me in conversations. We were able to work together on my mom's behalf. And truly, you know, this, like in what it talks about in the second paragraph, it's defining the fall from grace, which I see as in A Course in Miracles. It's the miracle, being able to just have a different perspective on something, and then everything thereafter is different. And of course, you know, it's not, and we had a good couple of weeks stretch with that, you know, and then so and that's just one example, but then there are other things that I'm seeing in my life where I'm just able to notice a lot more now. What is my part in this? And I can stop myself from reacting in the way that I would have before, which is not necessarily that I was responding verbally, but the way I was responding internally, all this judgment that was going on in my head, I can, you know, like stop myself and go, oh, I see that. I choose not to do that. You know, I choose to look at it a different way now. So, yeah, and you know, balance is something that I've been working on for a very long time. And it was very clear to me also when I fell down that flight of stairs and got the brain injury and 2 types of vertigo, like balance, you know, is the issue for me, you know, like this extreme codependence is not allowing me to live the kind of life that I would like to live. So that, you know, helped me to move toward making the type of changes that I needed to make.
Well,
So, yeah, that's
very
essentially
good.
what
That's very good to hear. Isn't it cool how your change of consciousness can affect others, like without sort of doing anything?
Yeah. And you know, it was such a terror. I didn't realize it, but you know, until afterwards, like a terror of being able to see this part of me, like I had this inside of me. This is part of who I am and can be, and like now I know that, I know it's there, but because I know I also have the freedom to choose in any moment to be different, to go a different way with it, I can just acknowledge it and go, okay, you know, it's sad that I, you know, went this long in my life, you know, having all of that, you know, that venomous side to me, it kind of still active. But, you know, the wonderful thing is, you know, today I can make different choices. So.
More power to you.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So, so I'll share something. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I like that word choice so much. And another word I like is contrast, because it's from seeing the contrast, I can make a choice. If I only see one side of the coin, it's not choice. So I want to thank everybody for sharing. If I had to present this lecture tonight so you'd all understand it, I would fail miserably, as that's not one of my fortes. So I think I thought, well, what motivates me even being here tonight? And I thought, I set an intention this last year to be more with like-minded people. And I thought, oh, so when it turns out, well, what do I want from that? I don't know, so I kind of play around with that. So I'm here with you tonight, and it just makes me smile. And I really, in reading the lecture and in being with all of you, what comes up is, well, what's in my toolbox? What do I use to get to choice? What do I use from the Pathwork to notice if I'm reacting or responding? So every day I do a to-do list, I do it for the next day. And then across the top, I have my toolbox. I have certain exercises, certain breathing things, certain things I do that when I fall off the wagon, how do I get back on? Can I get back on quicker than I used to? So that's kind of my measuring stick. So something from the Pathwork that I'm so grateful for, and this is the word that's coming up for me, is the basis of my life is gratitude, which is not the same as feeling happy all the time, because a lot of the time these days, I feel pretty sometimes sad, angry, disappointed, all the negative stuff comes up. So what I'm grateful for is that I know my personality type of reason, will, and emotion, my defense type. I know it backwards and forwards. And I'm so grateful for that, because my dominant one is emotion. So that means I'll give up my real needs to get something from you. And it's manipulative. So now, since that's dissolving so much, I can really feel it when I'm not in choice and I'm reacting that way, of how I might squelch myself to get some sort of approval. So the other day, so I work with that, the two sides of the coin. And what the guide said is that when we're flopping back and forth between happiness or unhappiness, pain or pleasure, our whole being is flopping around, either or, pain or pleasure. And when we can experience both, which we really do with a helper, somebody helping us, or therapy or something, or in prayer and meditation, then my arms are outstretched and I've got, happiness and unhappiness. They're both out there flapping around out there to my side, but my center is steady. It's steady and centered. And then when they can come into the front of me and I can hold both equally, that's the entree to the unitive state. And so it's a state that I can't describe from beliefs, because it's a beingness. It's just being, it's being in the unitive state. So I'm very grateful for that, because now I'm focusing on the side of the coin I tried to stay on most of my life and in my childhood was submission. The other side's aggression. Those are both dualistic terms. So as a child born the youngest of four in this kind of Midwestern family, of a high intuitive state, I could see everything that people weren't seeing. So I squelched the best in me. So I try to fit in. So that's been my unfoldment in the path, is to be who I am and be authentic. So I thought that would be so easy. But it means going to the other side of the coin of getting aggressive, as that's the gateway to self-assertion, is to get to the other side. So even now, I'm so grateful for my core energetic work and training, because I know when I react, I've got to get out my hitting back pataka. I look at a picture of someone I call God, and I say, I know I may be angry at somebody, and it's usually the ones who I'm closest to. I have children, I have grandchildren, I have all these people that I love the most. And I notice I'm being taken to the territory of detaching from them, meaning no expectations. Well, when I discovered this a few years ago, when someone said all expectations lead to disappointment and pain, I said, well, can't I have one? Not even one expectation? So this teacher said, well, it will lead to disappointment and pain, but that doesn't mean give up your needs. It's just trying to demand that that person fulfill your needs. That will lead to disappointment and pain. So that led to a lot of communication work and really looking at what am I expecting of others. So this has been, I'd say, one of the most difficult times of my life, and I've been through a lot, but those that I love the most, detaching and having expectations with them and demands, and then trying to cover it up with a mask of goodness, the good girl. That's over. That's finished, done with. And I need a lot of support for that, because I let it rip. I do my core energetics. I say, this person triggered something in me because they didn't cause it. But I'm going to use them now as a vehicle for release that from my energy field, from my emotion body, because I thought it's very important. We have 7 bodies, and the emotion body does not mature unless it's expressed, not dumped on anybody, but expressed. So I know that concept, and I'm grateful for that concept. So I then let it out. I let it rip. I've killed off so many people I love and thrown them off the George Washington Bridge and buried them under piles of dirt. And till I am gleeful and grounded, and I'm always talking to God, and I say, I'm doing this, excuse me, so that I may be filled with your love, light, and life. And let go of that from my energy field. And it works, and it just works. So that's kind of the end of my sharing. I'm finding that, excuse me, these tools in my toolbox just save my day, because I may wake up in the morning feeling happy and joyful, and by the evening I'm in pain and suffering. So I need to work the 2 sides of the coin. Excuse me. And so my God self told me the other day, you were in so many lifetimes, gave your power over to others. In this lifetime, you need to learn the tyrant side without being the tyrant. You don't have to have a lot of lifetimes now being a tyrant. You've been the tyrant, but you had so many. You're here to now balance the kind authority with the follower who is wise and thoughtful. So that's kind of it. A little bit of it's abstract, and I don't know how to explain it all, but that's it. I'm grateful for these tools, because that's what gets me through my day. And meditation and prayer, but a lot of the energy work. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, my sister. That was beautiful. Beverly, are any thoughts?
Yeah, I for some reason, I had a little bit of a hard time getting through this lecture. When I finished with it, the point I got from it was, you have to make friends with your shadow, and then you're good. So from listening to others, I was thinking about how when I first got in touch with the Pathwork, when I first found out that I caused everything, it was very shocking. But over the, I guess, 2 years that I've been coming, I see it very clearly, how I do the things how I cause most of the things. Although the bus coming at me, I never really thought about that. I'd have to really think about how that would work. But the things that happen in my life, I can see how either I cause it consciously or unconsciously. And that's the part that bothers me a lot, when I see something that happened and then I realize, oh, my unconscious caused that. And then I can kind of go back and figure out, oh, it's this issue that made me behave this way, that this ended up happening. So I have to kind of clean that up. So I guess that's pretty much the main point that I got from tonight. And I always say it, I'm sure I've said it in here many times. I get how it happens. The hard part is figuring out how to fix it, how to clean up your unconscious so that you stop creating things that you don't want. But that's the struggle. That's the work.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason is because whatever part of you created that thought it was the right thing to do at the time, thought it brought you more pleasure and fulfillment at the time. Their
Or
own
more
conclusion, or more safety, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I represent the New York City transit workers, so the bus drivers are never at fault. They can never be blamed.
Mm.
Just kidding. Yeah. Yeah, but I guess you have to unpack the motivations. You see, the lower self, the unconscious motivations are twisted and distorted, but we've come to accept them as the bargains we make with life, and we have to unpack them to understand why we came to those wrong conclusions in the first place. Right? I think that's what the work of the images is.
Yeah, I was thinking I should read those lectures on the image.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Stephen, how are things in Florida?
Things in Florida are pretty nice, actually. Sorry I'm late. I had another webinar. And I'm on a phone and it's giving me a lot of problems in and out. But anyway, as Marion said, I did wish to be with like-minded people. That doesn't always, I don't always have that opportunity. And so, you know, originally I said, well, you know, it's late and interrupting and so on. But there was something that said, go ahead, go for it. What's the big thing? You know, I missed your usually excellent introduction, Alan. So I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants in terms of this lecture. But flying by the seat of my pants is the way I fly best. So, you know, I use intuition a lot, you know, and I go a lot by feelings. I try to be very aware of my feelings. And I do tend to read the lectures. I'm not like my dear brother Guan. I don't underline them and digest them. I just tend to skim them. And whatever points stick out and resonate with me, those are the points that have to stick out. And that's pretty much the way I tend to go through life, by touching into not my mind, but my heart, whatever that means. Just being there and saying, it's like what Nike said, what would you like to do today? It's like, and you know, what would I like to do right now? And that's a real luxury. And I think what's really important in my life, what I'm trying to embellish, is gratitude. And I think gratitude really helps. During the darkest moments, having gratitude and realize how much I really have has truly, truly helped me. And what else has really helped me is that, and I'm not sure how much all this is in the lecture or lectures, I'm sure so much is, not trying to change anybody or the world, just accepting what is without fighting it, just being with it. It's a lot easier said than done. But I know in accepting what is in my life, I'm able to digest and absorb it better. And that's also accepting myself, self-compassion, which is not something I grew up with. Having compassion for myself, as well as compassion for the other, but first compassion for myself. You know, if you look at the word selfish, it has the word self in it. I don't think being selfish is selfish per se, it depends how one is selfish. But I think by being self-aware, I can project that out to others in a kinder, softer way, which is somewhat new for me. I didn't go through life like that. It was always competitive, and if you get more, I get less, and that's not really the way it works, seems to work. So to some extent, there's a sea of confusion in me, and just being in the confusion is really okay. It doesn't always feel well, or good. And the ego, or let's say the darker side, which Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, wants to solve it. And there aren't any solutions that I can come up with immediately. And there maybe aren't any solutions. So much is changing, opinions. What's an opinion? I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Should I fight you? I'd rather not. I'd really rather not. And to me, thoughts are really just electrical pieces of current. And some are positive, some seem negative, but can I just embrace it all? I don't know how much any of that helps anybody, but it helps me. And my life has been softer and better and nicer. And as a result, I'm better with others as well. And hopefully that's what really counts. So again, I'm sorry I'm late, and thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think you're beautifully embodying the unitive state. In the relaxation I've seen from you is a big part of it, I think.
Yes.
I think that, it's funny, like you think to yourself, I've only met a few truly spiritual people in my life. And one thing unites all those people. There's a feeling of relaxation about them. There's a lack of urgency. In other words, there's intensity, but not urgency. You know what I mean, Marion?
Absolutely. No,
You feel that way.
Feel it resonates through me.
It's a vibration. It's a vibration.
Vibration. It's a vibration.
Mhm.
I felt that with John P. sometimes, Eva, some of the people, I guess Desmond Tutu is like that. It's just like something's going on.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a real sense of unity of with the trees. I could just sit and talk to a tree, and it really answers me in the deepest, most spiritual sense. And you get to realize the intelligence of everything around you. Really understand everything around you is important. I'm not more important than this tree that's in front of me.
Right now, that's such a critical awareness. That is a beautiful thing to feel that.
Mhm.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's painful when I see people cut the trees down for their own need, for their house or whatever else. And I feel for it. So, I mean, there are two sides to the coin. There's also a lot of pain when feeling so much of that. But it's nice pain in a way. It's cathartic, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's important to take that on. I think that's why we're here on Earth, to take that pain on, to take those range of feelings on. The guide says it's a lot easier to be unhappy than to be happy.
Right.
Just like chill out with the unhappiness. But if you want to confront and really feel happiness, you got to work at it, right? You got to be aware. You got to raise your consciousness, because then you are more happy.
Right. And I used to be wedded to my unhappiness because it gave me reason to be, unhappiness. As long as I'm unhappy, I feel some aggression, and that's good. It's not good. Not good for me, anybody. Not good.
Yeah.
I feel better now.
Well, that's what I look at when I see our political discourse in America. It's like everyone's so angry. It's like everyone's just getting into it, just enjoying it, the anger. Hey, but they're welcome to it. They're welcome to it.
And the news seems to foster that, of course.
What?
The news seems to increase
Oh,
that
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
It's
More
entertainment.
eyeballs
Right.
looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's true. But that's not really about raising consciousness, right? It's about marinating in your own
juices.
Pick a metaphor, your own juices. Well, all right, my friends. Does anyone else want to say anything about this lecture? Give any more thoughts about your life experience, duality, unity?
So what are the concrete tools the spirit says to contact that inner self? So that's the way to overcome, right? But does he give any concrete tools?
Well, yeah, I think there's a whole meditation in the lecture that I read earlier, where you have to, the positive ego kind of gets down to business and directs the outer self to communicate with the inner self. When you, as the guide says, choose a constructive pattern of thinking, feeling, and willing. First, you have to make the unconscious conscious as much as you can, which means you have to unpack the images. You have to look at circumstances in your life for clues as to where the images are. And then, as the guide says in other lectures, you have to mold the soul substance, which means choosing the constructive patterns of thinking, feeling, and willing. Right, Marian?
Yes, it's in every lecture. When we study the defense lecture, I don't know when it was, because time has now become something else for me. I don't know what year I'm in, hardly any. In that defense lecture was it, I'm paraphrasing, learn what your dominant personality defense type is. It's a distortion of your dominant divine quality of serenity, love, and power. And so that reason, will, and emotion, study it, learn it. What's your higher, what are the aspects? Because that's what we pull from to defend. And it behooves us to learn what it is, what our each one is. My dominant one is emotion. And I know it backwards and forwards, and it just helps me so much in going through, because everything's accelerated. Everything's faster now. We're entering into new age, new humanity. Everything is faster, and we need more support. And so I just call it my toolbox, but that I know my defense type so much because I have charts on it. We studied it so much. So I just always emphasize that, and I'll end with that. We emphasize that.
Marian, can you say where we can find that? You've made reference to it, and I'm very interested, but I don't know where.
Well, there isn't the name of the lecture Reason, Will, and Emotion, Alan?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
Reason,
will, and emotion.
Reason, will, and emotion. Okay.
And I'm always open to sharing my charts in some way.
I wish you would do that in your toolbox too.
Great. Maybe you could send it by email to other people.
I'd have to take photographs of it and everything, but I could send some things out. I don't know. I have so much in my files. I'd have to go dig through files.
Maybe I should go visit you, Marian, and scan some of your documents.
Well, I mean, but reading the lecture first and kind of doing your own map of reason, because we have all three, we have a dominant one. And many will types will have a combination, will, reason, and will, emotion, or pure will. So there's variations on the theme here, and I'm emotion, and then there's the reason type. So that is going to make a lot of difference as to how I approach any of my conflicts. Makes all the difference in the world. And the defense lecture has a line in there suggesting you know that, so you know how to unravel your own defenses with, of course, the help of the higher self. It's the higher self that does it. Yeah.
Right. So what you're saying, Marian, is that it's critical to understand your own defense, exactly what characterizes it.
Yes. And of course, all that we've learned about duality is that there's one side of duality we always tend to want to stay on because we're more comfortable. Mine is submission. So just as I said tonight, I have to go to aggression. Well, I'm not going to go there. I fought against that my whole life. I'll be rejected and people are going to be angry at me and I'm going to be out there visible when I want to remain invisible. Like that side. And I'm doing that with a great deal of support and help inwardly and outwardly now, going to my tyrant and really letting my tyrant have a life, because at the core of that, when the two come together, is my true self-assertion. They're all distortions of the divine.
Right, and as you said, emotions have to be expressed.
The emotion body, they must be expressed in order for it to transform, which is so it doesn't mean dumping it on anybody or swallowing it in my whole system. And so it comes out, everybody's different. Everybody's different as what kind of support maybe you need, but it needs to be expressed. It could be those nasty letters or letters to pleading to God, or it's vast. It's vast. It's expressing them, but that's why I'm so grateful for my core training, because we had to deal with the emotion body too, all our bodies. Yeah.
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 Let me share this paragraph on page 6. I think in part he answers Teresa's questions, and I think it helps all of us to understand, I think, the main subject of one of them, really the subjects of the lecture tonight. And it is 1, 2, 3, and the 4th paragraph on page 6. And the guy says, your loneliness, your fears and conflicts come down to this. You do not do the only purposeful thing, to activate the divine nucleus within yourself. It is the only real, relaxed, and productive control. For this inner center can indeed solve all your problems, all problems, if only you let it. And you let it only when you call upon it.
Yes.
It is the inner being right in you that knows and understands the process of love without danger, of giving love and freedom, and therefore of receiving love and remaining free. Your outer self does not understand this. You cannot produce a state of mind that you do not truly comprehend. Your inner self can help you. Call upon it.
Yes, that's
That's the key, I guess, just calling upon it, and
that's
and asking
it,
for that help.
because that's it. Because at my lower self, the closer I get to transforming a lower self quality, the more it's going to hang on. The guy teaches this. It's going to grab at me so it doesn't get transformed. And it knows it's going to be transformed. So I love all those metaphors. I love all those metaphors too. So when I'm walking down the street and I'm running something in my mind, I have a mantra, but when that mantra gets pushed away and I'm doing some sort of, mind trip, then it comes, I have to express my lower self. However, not without the hand, the guide uses as a metaphor, always with the hand of God. It's never from my ego saying, oh, I'm now going to do X. It's like I tell my higher self. So now God talks to me and is coaching me, and we have a conversation. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Mariam. So we have our meditation. Hey, Tracy, can you light the candle? Is that going to work? Well, I don't have a candle on me. Handy anyway.
I don't have one. I'm just I'm gonna look, Alan. I don't.
I think maybe somebody should hold a candle and everyone else can.
I have a candle.
Yeah, would you light the candle?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll shut off the light so it's more just the candle. Hold on. And I'll do this.
Okay, I'm going to read the guide's meditation on the inner voice, my favorite Pathwork meditation, and then we will meditate for 15 minutes. Okay, here goes. You ready? The voice within you says, I am the ever-loving God, the ever-present creator. living within you, moving through you, expressing as you, as myriad forms, as you and you and you, as the animals, as the trees, as the sky, as the firmament, as everything that exists. I dwell in you. And if you allow me to act through you, to be known through your being, felt through your feelings, you will experience my power that is limitless. You will not fear the power that manifests on all levels. The power is great, but give in to me. Give in to this power, to the stream that surges forth that will make you cry and will make you laugh, both in joy, for you are me and I am you. I cannot act on this level without you being an instrumentality for me. And if you listen to me, I will guide you through every step of the way. Whenever you are in darkness, you are away from me. And if you remember this, you will make steps to come back to me. I'm not far away. I'm right here, in every particle of your own being. If you thus fulfill my will, you and I become more one, and I can fulfill your will.